All right, well, welcome everybody to the impact of green, affordable housing, a case study. This session is approved for 1 hour in continuing education, AIA HSW, GVCI, AIBD, Certified Green Professional, NARI Green, and may be applicable to your local or state-based design contractor license. Today I'll be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the Executive Director here at the Green Home Institute. Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Huge shout out to all of those who make it possible. Our big sponsor, Andersen Windows. Check them out for all of your fenestration needs. Panasonic, Serve, Sun Intuitive, all of our members, board of directors, volunteers, and presenters. We could not do this without you. All right, so with that, I'm very excited to welcome Alex. Alex provides project management and deliverable support for the community sustainability services and policy teams. He conducts research, community engagement, collects format data, and performs analysis and evaluation, and composes reports for various clients and projects. Recently, he managed the impact of Green Affordable Housing Research Project and currently manages the energy efficiency for Alliance Georgia, I think that is, and has involvement in Transformation Alliance Policy Committee Chair, working with equitable transit-oriented development in Metro Atlanta. He has a planning policy, environmental studies bachelor's from the University of Colorado at Boulder, and MPP in environmental policy from Georgia State University. And then joining him today is David Pedrick, who manages the Southface and Atlanta Home Builders Association Earthcraft Communities Program as an Associate Residential Sustainability Service, and he provides technical assistance and programmatic assistance, design review services for all projects that pass through the Earthcraft Communities program. So thanks to both of these folks joining us from the organization Southface Institute. And with that, I'll have them.
Thanks, Brett, for the excuse me. Thank you, Brett, for the introductions, and thanks to the Green Home Institute for hosting the webinar today. We're really excited to continue talking about our research project that we did largely in 2015, but partially in 2014 as well, on determining a better understanding of what are the impacts of green affordable housing. This is something that we've wanted to do, or my organization, David and I's organization, Southface here in Atlanta, for quite some time. We often hear from the development community, from builders, contractors, policymakers, other stakeholders in the world of housing development, and particularly affordable housing development, that green building and the technologies and measures included within it presents some prohibitive costs and may not enable them to deliver a project or a development deal as successfully as they would like to. And there are concerns about being able to recoup any kind of premiums that may come with a green building. So in order to get a better understanding of those costs and benefits that may come from including green building certifications within an affordable housing development, we wanted to really just put information out there, get data, actual data collected directly from developers, from contractors, from housing finance agencies, from the residents themselves, from the property managers, and others to get a better, more enhanced understanding of what these are, and not rely solely on anecdotal evidence, but to have more data to back up the argument that green is good for affordable housing. So that's what we're here to talk with you about today. We worked extensively with the Virginia Center for Housing Research at Virginia Tech. Dr. Andrew McCoy and one of his people at the center, Tenny Ladipo, were very instrumental in this project and process, and we absolutely couldn't have done it without them. And I encourage you all to look for them for any research partnerships in the future. They have a particular focus on sustainable development research. So we'll continue along here. Let me get my pointer out. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about our organization, Southface. This is the front facade of our eco office in our main campus here in Atlanta, Georgia. We're a sustainability nonprofit, 501c3. We were established in 1978 under our founder and outgoing executive director, Dennis Creech, focused mainly on solar energy policy and energy efficiency. And now we're kind of a one-stop shop for the built environment. So we're focused around various focus areas and teams within Southface on residential construction and design and development, commercial construction design development. We have a whole education and training center. I work on our community sustainability services team and policy team, working on a host of things that Brett mentioned today. And David Pedrick here, my co-presenter, works on our residential sustainability services teams and works largely with the Earthcraft program. Earthcraft was developed in 1999 by the Greater Atlanta Home Builders Association and Southface as a green building program with a focus on the Southeast. We have a very particular climate here in the Southeast, and that program was designed to make sure that the systems and everything within it are acclimated to the geography in which they are. So I'll move along. Our vision for Southface is to have a regenerative economy, a sustainable resource use, social equity, and a healthy built environment for all. Our mission is to promote sustainable homes, workplaces, and communities through education, research, advocacy, and technical assistance. And this project really falls on all of these, but particularly the areas of research and advocacy as it relates to our organizational strategic plan. Now we'll get into the meat of the report and the project that we completed. Early 2016, January, the report was released. And I think we talked a little bit about this, but why did we take it on? I came here about 5 years ago, and we were starting to have these conversations about needing to have actual collected data that was verified, analyzed, evaluated, to have a better understanding, a more comprehensive understanding of green building and its impact on affordable housing. We are a sustainability nonprofit, so we very much focus on issues of energy efficiency and green building and water efficiency and community benefits. And that's where the affordable housing component comes in. It's a critical component to having a resilient community and a sustainable community, to make sure that we have diverse populations that are well connected to the services and everything that they need to live, thrive, and do that healthy, comfortably, safely, and hopefully they do it environmentally friendly as well. So why the Southeast? There's not a lot of specific data on the Southeast in terms of green building costs and benefits, or even analysis on affordable housing policy. It tends to focus a lot on other areas where that it might be more progressive, the Northeast, the West Coast. You see a lot of research coming from those areas, the Mid-Atlantic included, but the Southeast doesn't get a ton of attention in terms of research on looking into green building and affordable housing and what are those costs and benefits associated with it. The census, the U.S. Census, indicates that the South and the Southeast is the most impoverished region in the nation. It will lead the nation in both net population change and housing starts over the next 20 years. So we have a very poor region, so we need a lot of good, supportive housing. And we're going to be having a lot of housing starts and a lot of population change. So we need to make sure that that's as well designed and constructed as possible for all the people that are currently here, as well as those that will be moving here, to make sure that it's as affordable and green as can be. Some states in the Southeast, this project focuses primarily on Alabama, Georgia, and both of the Carolinas, North and South, and elsewhere, do not generally have strong policies, incentives, or requirements for developers or contractors to use green building certification programs or the measures or technologies that may be included in them. These states would include Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and the majority of the rest of the South and the Southeastern United States. Other states such as Georgia, where Southface is located, and Virginia have incentivized and required green building programs and measures in their qualified allocation plans. And if you don't know what a QAP is, those are the plans that dictate and determine how low-income housing tax credits are allocated, which is the most most effective and most used type of financing or funding resource that developers can tap into for any kind of gap financing they may have on their affordable deals. And that goes through your state housing finance agency here in Georgia. It's our Department of Community Affairs. So the research aims to understand where states are in terms of sustainability of their QAPs, policies and plans for affordable housing, and work to encourage other lagging states to adopt more green policies and preserve the working ones that are already in place by providing the necessary data and analysis on actual costs to construct, operate, and maintain green and non-green or conventional, traditionally constructed affordable housing. We work very closely with our housing finance agency, the Department of Community Affairs here in Georgia, on greening their QAP, and we're really proud of the progress that and the leadership that they have taken over the last 7 to 10 years or so to really make green something and sustainable development something that's very important to them in their developments that they are helping to support through low-income housing tax credits. But in going through that process, as many of you probably know, there's some pushback. I mean, the realities of what it takes to get a deal done, the costs associated with it, it gets very tight, and it's not easy to do, and those resources are limited. And we want to make sure that if we are adding things to it, that we're doing it in a way that makes sense, that there's a benefit attached to it, there's some savings for those stakeholders along the way. We also wanted to share data with others to increase the pool of research and analysis on green affordable housing cost-benefit. As you all know, if you've done research projects of your own, it's a difficult task alone just to collect the data. To be able to speak the same language as a property manager or developer, and to be able to understand where that data may lie and to then collect that data and to get it in a time-efficient manner is difficult. And we definitely experienced that along the way. But we really just want to get more research out there, as we mentioned before, for the South and the Southeast so we can get a better, hopefully expand these policies and incentives across the region. We talked a little bit about this. The costs and benefits are largely unknown and anecdotal due to a lack of hard data and analysis. We're trying to debunk the cost containment argument that green is prohibitively expensive and that profit margins are too thin and costs are too difficult to recoup. We want to ensure that decisions made with regard to appropriating funds for affordable housing development, such as was mentioned, the low-income housing tax credit, the most important and effective financial resource. Over 2.5 million housing units since 1987 have been supported through the low-income housing tax credit program, which is a part of the Internal Revenue Code, and $8 billion comes from HUD to the states for funding annually. Ideally, the costs and benefits from green affordable housing will work to increase adoption in the Southeast and nationally and be able to be used as a preservation tool, to be able to save money on the O&M, the utilities, along the life cycle of the building, can really make it easier to maintain affordable housing and preserve it as affordable. We are losing a lot of affordable housing across the country, and a lot of it has serious deferred maintenance. And even when it goes up as new construction, with this, which this research primarily focuses on, they're not necessarily doing the best job that they can. And there are some gaps in the energy code, and if it's not being adequately verified, and code compliance, as we know, can be a little bit spotty in terms of verifying work. Green building can help to fill that gap and to provide that third-party verification and a better understanding of what you're getting and what you're investing in it. So these were our project assumptions or our hypotheses. We wanted to compare actual costs to design, develop, construct, and operate above code, what we call green affordable housing, versus comparable energy code compliant housing or traditionally constructed conventional construction. We also want to determine what are the secondary costs, the operations and maintenance costs for the residents, for the operators and the managers of green versus non-green housing. And then further determine any economic and health benefits that may be associated with green affordable housing versus non-green affordable housing. And this image here is actually a sustainable development in Savannah, Georgia. It is Earthcraft certified, LEED certified, and it's a great project. They have photovoltaics on the property, rainwater harvesting, and a lot of just traditional off-the-shelf, very basic, energy-efficient design and water-efficient design. We're not talking about you know, reworking the wheel here. A lot of these things and a lot of things that we promote here at Southface are off-the-shelf technologies. They are proven to work in the place, but we do need to get a better understanding of the actual economics, and that's what we're trying to do here today. To give you a little bit of a description of the project, these were multifamily affordable developers that were engaged and contacted and recruited to participate in the study in the states of Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. They needed to be recently constructed or rehabbed, so recently receiving tax credits or some other form of subsidy or a recent groundbreaking. And then they needed to have at least 12 months or a year of occupancy data to make any kind of a significant measurement of O&M or utilities. And we have a broad definition of affordable. These are all low-income housing tax credit supported properties. Some of them have some HUD subsidies attached to them. They may have some public housing authority assistance, may have a component of housing vouchers. But it's pretty broad in terms of what we're constituting as affordable. But these are below that range of 80% AMI. These are really touching the 60% and below AMI properties, particularly when you're talking about LIHTC and HUD-supported properties. Building and resident types, mostly new construction. We did have a couple of rehab properties that we did include. Those have actually been eliminated from the full cost analysis. As you all are probably aware, there's some very serious differences, very significant differences between new construction and rehab. And because most of our sample ended up being new construction from those that we were able to recruit and the developments that would work with our eligibility requirements, we decided it would be best to focus mainly on new construction in this study in terms of our full cost analysis. These are a pretty even split of family and senior residences, and it's mostly low-rise, some mid-rise, and there was one high-rise development that was actually a rehab property. And we wanted to analyze and evaluate the stakeholder cost benefit across the board for residents, for property managers, for the developers and the owners, as well as the housing finance agencies that are kind of dictating the policy and plans for their particular states. This is another property in the Savannah area that was actually included in our study. So a little bit about the project timeline and the process. Our first task was to do a preliminary analysis to look at the existing research, to engage with knowledgeable stakeholders around what is the necessary research and data that we need to tackle for this project. What's the gap? What are we missing out there? We did a little bit of that. Then we got into partner recruitment, engagement of developers and owners and property managers. Some of these were existing relationships that we had through our providership and administration of green building programs, energy efficiency programs, as well as new leads that we had through friends and contacts. Then we did our research design. This is where we determined our methodology, did our literature review, started to figure out the scope of the project. And then we moved on to the development identification, which developments are we actually going to use, which of those are eligible based upon our criteria, and work on getting access to all the data and information that we needed to collect, which was immense. That was utility release forms, to get into the in-unit consumption, the apartment level data. That was common area consumption, that was getting it from the owners and the managers. That was a whole host of surveys that we put out for developers, residents, property managers, and housing finance agencies, as well as actual cost documentation and O&M budgeting and accounting documentation. And then we did our data, continued to do our data collection and started our research analysis. So started actually doing our comparative analysis, our statistical analysis, our comparisons to RS means, construction cost data, and so on and so forth. And then we got into sharing the information and doing our communications and outreach. We did a bunch of conferences and presentations over the last year or so, from the EBA conference to Greenbuild to some local ones here in Georgia, and a couple of webinars as well, and some our own local conference here that Southface hosts called Green Prints. So did a lot of industry communications and sharing of the report and getting that information out there like we're continuing to do today. So what are the methods and data resources? I said before, we did a literature review. We established an advisory committee made up of developers, owners, managers, a representative or two from the Housing Finance Agency, other folks involved in affordable housing and green building and academia and research. We had folks from Georgia Tech, from all over, mostly local to Atlanta and Metro Atlanta and Georgia, just based upon getting people to come in person and discuss these things, but also spoke with a lot of the state contacts and local contacts around the study area states. For development construction costs, we use cost certifications that are submitted to the Housing Finance Agency, as well as an AIA document called a G702. We did a series of surveys online via Survey Gizmo and also made print versions available for those without computer access, development and construction survey, construction and specifications, property management, resident surveys, and Housing Finance Agency. And here you'll see the HUD sampling rate that we used for the residents in the buildings. Continuing on our methods, O&M costs, we use budget reports and account audits. We used WeGoWise, that's the image here that you'll see on the dashboard. For our utility tracking and benchmarking, we used RF means to benchmark our construction cost data. We did some comparative statistical analysis of green versus non-green and also did qualitative analysis. And here again, this is the screenshot from our dashboard here on WeGoWise. This is where the worst buildings are, the most inefficient and expensive. This is where you want to be. You want to be down here. You'll see most of them are clustering around the middle. And we'll get into more of that later on for sure.
So to give you a little bit of context on the buildings that actually participated in this study, to gather these buildings, we comb through lots of LIHTC documentation to find potential participants, as well as using the connections that we have just for administering the Earthcraft program and other LEED certifications. But to give you just a kind of a overview of the green building participants in the study, most of the buildings were occupied between 2011 and 2012, and that means that they participated in the QAP or were funded or started in the 2009 to 2010 time frame. Most of the buildings are low-rise, new construction. There are a couple exceptions, like we said, for that. There is a rehab and a historic rehab that was a high-rise. Those are both highlighted in red, and Alex is pointing them out now. So Alex said earlier that those, when we do look at some of the averages later, we excluded those from those averages due to the nature of a high-rise and the fact that these are rehab projects that really skewed some of the data and pulled the data in one direction. So we excluded those from the other new construction projects. Now, you'll also notice that our study was covering Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, but almost all of our green building projects are in Georgia and North Carolina. And that's due to the fact that those two states incentivize green building programs in their QAP. So South Carolina and Alabama, they're just, frankly, you can't find those projects. And that leads us to why we did allow Energy Star. We included Energy Star in the green building, and we acknowledge that Earthcraft and LEED are more holistic programs, and where Energy Star is strictly looking at energy usage. But the outcomes of the study is looking at operating costs and energy and utility costs, and Energy Star has an outsized impact on those utilities. So we thought it warranted to include that in the above code green building study for these affordable housing study. And also, it's about an even split between rural and urban projects, and an even split between family and senior homes. So. Now, for the non-green participants, they're almost all of them are Alabama and South Carolina, and again, it's a similar selection time frame as the green building participants. So it's a similar time frame for 2012 put in service, and 2009, 2011 was the QAP year. And again, it's an even split between family projects and senior projects. and even split between urban and rural locations. There are fewer projects in the non-green participants, and that's due to, again, the nature of the QAP and the sizes of the states. There's just not as many projects being built in these locations. So there are fewer projects, fewer square footage, and fewer units in the non-green sample set moving forward. This is a map of all the locations. The base layer is showing you the area median income for those counties. So just to give a little context of the income of the places where these projects are built. And you can see Alabama has most of the non-green, a couple in South Carolina, and then the green projects are in the population centers of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Thank you, David. So now to get into the meat of the study and the findings outline and the findings and takeaways we want to share with you all. We did a resident survey. We got about 650 responses. We also did a development and construction survey of our developers, our property owners and managers, and also extended that to some other partners via public survey, and did the same for the property management survey. For HFA, we only surveyed the study states that are included in the study, Alabama, Georgia, and both Carolinas. We looked at total development costs, direct costs associated with construction and development, as well as the indirect costs or the operations and maintenance. And we looked at over 700 meters of WeGoWise data, primarily along electricity. We tried to collect water meter data, but the data quality ended up to be poor. It was inconsistent and unable to be verified by the owners and managers as if it was correct or not. And in determining what was a unit water meter versus common area, outdoor or indoor use. It was also difficult to link WeGoWise up with what are, let's just say, some older systems in cities and counties in terms of water service that don't even have historical data available online to be linked up with a WeGoWise server, where it's that seamless process of tracking data electronically and digitally. So now we'll get into it and talk about the resident survey.
Yeah, so prior to some of the education efforts of the study, we did resident surveys and surveys to kind of judge perception of green affordable housing. And this question that we posed to the residents was the overall affordability of the home that they currently lived in. And so that is a newly constructed, affordable building that is either green certified or not green certified. And so there, I think that you said earlier, we have 648 people we asked, and about 65% of those were living in green buildings, and the other 35% were in traditional construction. And so right now you can see a couple the results from the question about the affordability compared to their previous home that they lived in. And so for the people living in green buildings, 62% said that their current home is much more affordable than their previous home. And for this question, affordability was the combination of rent and utilities. And that's compared to the people living in traditional constructed buildings. 51% of them said that their current location is much more affordable than their previous home. So it does indicate that there's people in the green homes do perceive a more affordable rent and utilities. And then it's about the same for the people who didn't see much of a difference. 31% say it's about the same affordability in a green home compared to 40% in the non-green home. Yeah. The next question we wanted to ask was about overall satisfaction of their home. And this question, I think, really addressed the fact that, it ended up showing the fact that they're living in a new home. And they're very satisfied with their new home because it's something that they may not have had previously. So the results were almost identical across the board, that the people living in a green home were just as satisfied as the people who were living in a non-green home, and it's almost spot on, 68% compared to 69%. And the only real difference, but still not too different, is the much less satisfied category. Slightly more people were much less satisfied in the green home compared to the non-green home. And from talking to some of them, I can imagine it may be from ventilation, but we can talk about that later.
So as part of this, we recognize that non-energy benefits that would include health provide a serious opportunity for obviously better health, comfort, safety, and lower costs, particularly for those that are in most need of those savings for low-income individuals that are living in affordable housing. So we wanted to try and get at what are those health costs and any benefits that might be achieved from a green development versus a non-green development. As you'll see from the graphs here, there's really not much of a difference when we ask them to compare their current medical conditions compared to their previous home for green versus non-green. You'll see that symptoms stayed the same at 42% for green, comparable 38% for non-green. In terms of improving, it was 10% for non-green and 14% for green, so slightly better for the green developments, but nothing to any level of significance that we can say absolutely the green developments are providing health benefits to these low-income residents. A majority of these current residents are living in conventional or they were living in the conventional housing, said that their medical symptoms stayed the same as their previous home. And while the majority of the current residents living in conventional housing were also not able to answer the question, the next largest group also reported the symptoms stayed the same, and that's across green and non-green, although slightly better for the green responses. The health-related survey showed that 28% of the participants self-reported asthma and other respiratory conditions in their previous homes, and there was a small decrease in those symptoms moving to their green and non-green residences, about 2 to 3%. A larger proportion of the residents reported that other medical conditions showed improvement since moving to their current homes, 13%. But this is not an easy task. This is a whole study on its own. You come against legal concerns and liability issues. You'll see that presented here by the blank space at green 3. This property owner was not comfortable with us asking any health-related questions because of liability concerns. If a resident came back and reported something essentially through a survey, the owner would then have to act and would then be responsible for any kind of negative outcomes that might have come from living in their property. So that particular owner was very cautious and didn't want to ask the questions, even though it was a newly constructed green building. They still had these concerns. But these kinds of public health studies are very complex. It definitely suggests that we need additional research to draw any significant conclusions regarding the health implications and outcomes of green versus non-green affordable housing residents. Some limitations of the study that we had, we didn't have access to medical records. A lot of the residents didn't know if they were living in a green or non-green development or a building or not. In retrospect, and we consulted with some public health folks over at Emory University here in town, and we need to give the survey twice to see if there are any changes from the baseline and better assert if they're green or not. There was also no criteria for how long someone had to be living in a place, and we should have established that to get some better, more concrete health data understanding. But a great outcome of this is we have a newly improved health survey instrument that Emory helped to develop with us in the public health school, and we look forward to continuing to investigate the health benefits and non-energy benefits in affordable housing. We're doing a lot of work right now, as I'm sure many of you are, on healthy housing and better connecting energy efficiency and healthy housing interventions together, and making sure that the finances and policies and plans are all well aligned. So this is something that we definitely want to continue to research and to build upon. Moving on to the developer side of the stakeholders, give you a little bit of a characterization of the developer owners that were polled in this survey. 72% have at least 11 years of experience in affordable housing. About 30% have developed at least 500 units of affordable housing, and nearly 40% have developed more than 1,000 units. 86% do low-rise, another about 50 say they do mid-rise, and most do not do any high-rise development. They're fairly well spread out throughout the region of our studies. Most work in Georgia, a good percentage, about 40% work in North Carolina, about 40% work in South Carolina, and work in some other states such as Louisiana, Virginia, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. So as you'll see here on the left, we'll talk about the programs that are most often being used in these 4 states. Earthcraft, as we mentioned, which is a program we developed in 1999 with the Home Builders Association of Greater Atlanta, has certified 40,000 units. About 70% are using Earthcraft, about 55% are using Energy Star, another 14% or so are using some form of LEED, another 7% are using NGBS, and in the other category that actually mostly includes some other LEED programs that were referenced. And then NA, many states aren't, many developers, depending on the state they're working in, because of incentives and requirements, they're not using green building certification programs. Their primary motivations are kind of as you would think for implementing green technologies, reducing a tenant utility bill obligation or burden, reducing their O&M costs, building durability or life cycle, and their overall commitment to sustainability. When it comes to new standard construction, these developer, builder, contractor survey responses are telling a story of diffusion of green technology without using a green building certification program as well, as some of the additional survey data told us. More than 90% of the participants report that they always install Energy Star appliances. A majority of these builders sometimes or always install above-code insulation, high-efficiency mechanical equipment, high-efficiency lighting, and above-code windows. But on the contrary, many are not installing renewable energy systems, and that could be where that cost prohibition can come in. But as we've seen across the country, those costs for solar are coming way down and are approaching some form of grid parity depending on your local utility market. Other programs that people mentioned were Energy Star, and the other, for some reason, they didn't select Energy Star when mentioning, when determining what programs they're using. And something else that was interesting when trying to tease out what the economic benefits are from it, many are not tracking, the majority of the developer, owner, contractor respondents aren't tracking payback. They aren't tracking ROI for the green properties or the technologies within them. So they really don't have a true understanding of what those costs and benefits really are, and if it does make a good decision for them. So I think some of this study was beneficial to the industry on that end as well, to give them more information on what those economics might look like. They also had financial incentive motivations for implementing green technologies. That goes back to the program requirements that each individual state may have, or the Housing Finance Agency, where Georgia heavily incentivizes things like LEED, Energy Star, Earthcraft, and other states such as Alabama don't really do much in terms of incentivizing the more holistic programs. Now we'll move on to the next slide. Developer survey benefits. In talking about scope of work, is it providing any efficiencies in how you're able to deliver the project? It definitely skewed a little bit around neutral, but it was a pretty even distribution around disagree, neutral, and agree, with the majority of respondents indicating they agree or strongly agree that green buildings provide scope of work benefits over non-green. Also, the majority of respondents agree that it provides a better quality of end product by going through the green building certification program compared to constructing conventionally, with about 72% of respondents indicating a higher quality of end product. I think some of the neutrality in the chart on the left could be to the point that when taking on a new technique, a new program, a new skill, there's a bit of a learning curve involved. So it may take folks a little bit of time to work through the process and be familiar with the program to really be able to see those scope of work benefits that are provided by the integrated design process within these green building certification programs. So now to get to the property manager side and asking them questions about efficiency. We asked about if green buildings are more energy efficient than non-green. Most of the response was around neutral, although the second highest was at 38% for agree or strongly agree, and very similar on the side of water efficiency as well, albeit a little bit higher. And you'll see here a comment from a respondent was that because of rising utility costs, they cannot tell any difference between a green and a non-green project. Property managers have a unique perspective on the long-term durability and maintenance challenges of a development, and they added some valuable context to the study. But they also indicated that they may not have as much awareness of actual data and cost on the O&M side of what is actually being used. How much electricity, if they happen to have natural gas on site, are they actually using month to month and on a historical annual basis? And the same goes for water. We found that they're not really doing much to analyze that or understand any trends involved with it. They also don't have a lot of access to the in-unit or resident use or history. They're not doing any tracking or benchmarking for the most part. There's a lack of education, awareness, and training generally, particularly on the property management and maintenance side, as we heard through surveys and conversations with the staff. And going back again to the learning curve, you know, it takes some time to get acclimated to new technologies and programs and be able to utilize them effectively. So to now get into more of the costs and asking that of the property managers, we asked them generally, do green buildings have lower utility costs than conventional properties? They were very similar in this response to the last two on energy efficiency and water efficiency, mostly neutral at over 50%, but the other side with nearly a third agreeing or strongly agreeing that they do have lower utility costs. Then we also asked them a kind of a two-pronged question. Do they have lower utility costs, and should this allow for a reduced utility allowance? They were mostly neutral around it, so very similar to the chart here on the left. The comment here we have is we do see some savings on the systems, but it's hard to determine if it's simply because they're newer units and by default more efficient, or if it's because it's the specifically higher efficiency units. So it's a very telling comment that we had from a property management and very informative to our research here. Coming up with, well, how much are the green building programs really pushing code, and are those O&M benefits accruing to the property? As we see again, they're not necessarily tracking that. But contrary to the respondents' comments, our WegoWise utility data actually indicates that green buildings have lower energy usage. We'll get into that a bit later, but we did find that there was lower utility usage. So to back up our assumption and some of this agreement with the statement from the property managers themselves. Now moving on to the next slide.
So a lot of this commentary has kind of indicated that there is a need for education for the property managers and for the residents about energy efficiency. And they also agree to an extent. We asked the question, does managing a green building require more resident education. 31% of respondents agreed and 50% were neutral. And one of the great comments about this was the inability of users to operate their unit system is one of the most notable headaches of an initial lease-up with a high-efficiency system. And I know this for a fact because managing the Earthcraft Communities program, I go out and do property management trainings for every Earthcraft community, as well as resident trainings for every Earthcraft community. And it's across the board is talking about how the system works and how it is supposed to work. And that's something that is really important to seeing some of the benefits that we're going to talk about in a minute, is if the property management doesn't know some of the kind of central tenets of building science and the building as a system, you're not able to see all of the great results of a green building or even a regular constructed building. So the next question was, does above code green building certification increase the staff knowledge and ability to verify construction and development specs than energy code compliant buildings? And it's weighted towards neutral and agree that going through the green building certification process does help increase staff knowledge. And so some more like kind of commentary on the education side of property managers. Some of the comments were that for older residents, it's harder for them to use the thermostat. And they strongly agree, and a commenter said the inability of users to operate the unit system, sorry, I said that already, and that's really what we have seen, and that's something that needs to be focused on in a lot of these green building programs, because when you go out and teach the property managers, oh, sure, we know how to run it, but hardly ever are they actually actively talking to the residents about how to properly use the thermostat, or the fact that what is the ventilation system in the unit and why is it important, and what benefits do you receive from that. And so education is really a big portion of the green building program, and this data really kind of supported that notion. So following up with the green building with the property managers, we also asked the housing finance authorities about how they perceive the green building program in their own kind of their world. When they include the green building program in their qualified allocation plan or other financing criteria, what do they get out of that? Their primary service is to serve the residents, but are they getting any efficiencies out of using that green building program in administrative costs or in quality assurance and quality control for their buildings? Now, we also asked, so they also said about 50% agreed that a green building is more energy efficient, and 75% agreed that they do have lower utility costs. And again, a high level agreed that it does have greater level of resident education. Then what we're kind of getting at there, though, is there's a real equal distribution across the perception of does it reduce administrative costs due to the kind of the inherent quality assurance that is in a green building program. And so it was 25%, it was neutral across all choices there, whether strongly disagree or strongly agree or somewhere in between there. And this could have to do with some of the inconsistencies in the QAP process, and it also may indicate that we need to provide additional technical assistance to the housing finance authorities so they understand what efficiencies they could use and could lean on the green building program to increase the efficiency of their process.
So now to get into the more detailed costs of our analysis on the economic side, green versus non-green cost summary here. You'll see that in terms of total cost, green developments were actually about 5% less for green. This is not a huge difference, but does align well with some anecdotal perceptions around the true cost for green. That could be plus or minus 3 to 5%. It does illustrate that it doesn't cost more to build green. It can actually cost less, so that it's a worthwhile investment. On the hard cost side, it was more expensive by about 2% for green compared to non-green. This could be due to materials costing more in some markets, due to new technologies and incomplete market diffusion, labor costs in more urban versus rural locations, difficulty procuring high-efficiency equipment at a low cost. Those could be some of the factors involved in that 2% difference, which is relatively insignificant. In terms of soft costs of construction, we found that green had a 13% advantage over non-green. We believe this really is a testament to the integrated design process and those scope of work benefits that we were alluding to in the survey that are afforded by the green building certification programs. And a lot of this was relayed through some more detailed surveying of the owners and managers on costs and specifications. So we're seeing that green buildings in Georgia and both the Carolinas are costing less to design and build than the non-green alternatives in Alabama and South Carolina. And to get into hard costs, those are materials, labor, equipment used directly in the construction of the building. Soft costs would be those design and construction fees associated with the management of the development process. So for the direct and hard costs, respondents had some comments. 100% of the participants believe that typical direct construction costs for a green certified building are more expensive. On average, they think that the hard costs for green are about 10% more expensive. For the soft costs, they think that those are about 3% more expensive, and 3 to 7% more expensive. So the assumptions and the perceptions of the developers and contractors are not too far off from what we're estimating, but they are a little bit higher in terms of a disadvantage to the green developments here. Now moving along to a more detailed breakdown of the costs. We have here a green and non-green detailed cost summary. So we break them out by the hard cost of construction and the soft cost of construction. And you'll see the green developments are characterized by lower substructure costs here in the green text where there's green font. That indicates an advantage, a cost benefit for green. The green developments are also characterized by lower shell costs and lower equipment and furnishing costs. The non-green developments had a benefit in terms of interiors, services, and special construction. Other is a category that would only apply to the green buildings. That's why you're seeing this extra $259 a square foot. Those would be those extra hard costs associated with the green technologies that aren't tracked by the non-green properties because they're not being implemented. The soft costs of development, you'll see that green has an advantage on contractor services, professional services, construction financing, permits and fees, and the developer fee. You'll see that site development was specifically called out and highlighted here. And we learned that the costs for site development and land acquisition are often reported differently and vary by development company and can vary based on the development type and the location due to differences in construction type, geography or location, access to services, such as the materials and the labor and the utilities. And site development has a much greater difference in cost, and most categories are close to each other, so you'll see that there is some significant variability there. And due to that significant variability, we did not include this in our overall total cost average that you saw on the previous slide. This was eliminated, but we did want to present it here just for conversation. For the green developments in this study, hard costs vary from about $72 a square foot to about $42 at the low end. The wide variability is due to the economy of scale. The lowest cost per square foot results in the largest development and can also be subject to the scope of work. scope of work differences can include relative density, amenities, common spaces, unit layout, building height, construction type, location, and other specs. We found that green is presenting some cost benefit savings and some cost benefits across the various divisions of hard and soft construction costs here. Moving on to the next slide on O&M, and this was very surprising for us. We were not expecting for the O&M cost to be so high for green. I think we all guess that you're going to get your savings and accrue those savings over time through the operations and maintenance of the property, through less maintenance, less need for staff and administration, lower utility costs. And you will see that utility costs are about 12% lower per square foot for the green versus non-green developments. But overall, the green developments are costing about 15% more in terms of total O&M cost per square foot. Maintenance was very significant at about 30% more per square foot for the green developments, and the administration required going back to the learning curve, the education of the staff and the managers was about 17% higher for the green buildings. So again, we're harping on it again. Education is critical for the maintenance staff, for the property managers, in order to ensure that we're seeing all of these benefits accrue early and sustainably throughout the life cycle of the project. We do see the emphasis on energy efficiency is working with the utility savings there at about 12% for green versus non-green. And again, it suggests that the gap is wider than just cost, wider than just education, but does include cost as well. How many times staff is having to go out and those labor costs, as well as procurement deals for the materials that are going into these properties. So this was very surprising for us, but we do think much of the differences here can be explained by proper education of the residents, managers, and the staff, and that they're well-trained, certified, and credentialed to work on green developments that might have higher efficiency systems and such in them compared to the non-green or energy code compliant properties.
Hey, Alex, we
Yeah.
are at 1 o'clock now, and I'm just wondering if you think we can get to questions here pretty soon.
Yes, I think let's skip ahead to the we'll skip ahead to the utilities.
Okay, perfect.
And
thank you.
I'll go relatively quick through the rest of this, and then get to the last key finding slide, and then we'll have some time for questions.
Okay,
but
great.
Thanks. I'll go through these, like I said, because I do want to have plenty of time for Q&A. But we did compare to RS Means construction cost data to help to benchmark our data and our assumptions across green and non-green. Overall, we found that they're deviating considerably from the average, and we need better data. RS Means is not recording data for, as you'll see, at least 3 areas and divisions of work of the building. The same was true of the non-green when comparing to RS Means. There's significant variability between our costs and theirs, but at least the variability is the same, so as a benchmark, it can suggest consistency across the sample, but that the national data and our regional sample data are not lining up very well, but the data within itself of the sample is.
Yeah, and just visually, this is kind of what Alice was just talking about, how nationally, the survey and the cost certification data is a little bit variable compared to the RS Means averages. So utility tracking, we said earlier that we used WeGoWise, and WeGoWise is just an interface that allows you to link directly to the utility, and that caused problems for rural areas that may not have the ability, not rural, water utilities that may not have that capability to upload straight to WeGoWise. But we did have over 1 million square feet and 18 buildings. And
yeah, and I just want to reiterate how difficult and time consumptive of a process this is. If you're trying to get into the units where you have individual account holders, and you need to get individual tenant release forms for 30% of a 100-unit building, let's say, and you need to get 33 apartments to submit. It's very difficult. Even with hosting pizza parties on site, offering gift cards, and it was exceedingly difficult to get the information. But I think we did a pretty darn good job of at least getting an adequate amount.
Yeah, so what WeGoWise allows you to do, it has its own portfolio of buildings. And it allows you to compare your building to their portfolio of similar building type. And for the green projects that we have in our portfolio, we had a range of 41% to 73% more efficient than the WeGoWise median. And so that's some fairly significant energy savings, which are a little bit larger than the standard construction non-green benchmarked homes. And so for the non-green, we saw anything from 25 to 61% more efficient than the median. But to compare the two against each other is kind of what we're actually looking at and interested in. And to do that, we saw that it was about 13.6% less kilowatt per hour per square foot in the green construction over the non-green construction. And if you were to, so that's a per square foot kind of number. And this is what the green electricity cost per unit look like for the portfolio of projects.
So it's about $65 per unit per month across the green sample, and then about $70 per month per unit for the non-green sample. So you'll see there's some cost savings there for the green building.
And so that shows about, oh yeah, it's right here.
So the percentage difference on a monthly per square foot basis for electricity cost, we had one gas meter. So this is all electric costs on the energy side. About 14% savings for green to non-green. On a per unit basis, about 7% savings. This is equating to saving a family in an affordable housing family development about $96 or almost $100 per month. Per year, excuse me, saving about $8 per month. And for seniors, they're saving even more, saving over $10 per month and over $120 per year. So you can effectively say, based upon our averages of electricity costs per month, you're saving a month to a month and a half of utility costs, electricity costs at least, by residing in a green building certified development versus a non-green one. So I do want to get to questions. Just to quickly go through key takeaways from our study. Families are saving $100 a year. Seniors are saving $120. The green developments on the owner-paid side, it's saving owners about $5,000 per year on utility costs. Green developments are spending 12% less on common area energy, so owner-paid energy, and resident or in-unit consumption in the apartments, they're spending and using 14% less energy, less kilowatt hours. Green developments overall, in terms of total construction costs, are 5% less per square foot, 13% less on soft construction costs. Non-green developments are a nominal 1.6 to 2% less expensive in terms of hard costs. O&M costs are 15% more expensive for the green developments, 15% less for non-green. We really think education and training and certification of folks on site is critical to achieve the savings that we think are there and have seen there through the utility cost savings. And most of the stakeholders polled agree that green developments are more energy efficient. The majority of developers indicate that green buildings provide benefits in terms of quality of end product and being able to achieve their firm's objectives and mission. Property managers and residents do seem to require a greater level of education on these technology systems and programs. And we can stop there and open it up to questions, because I know we're a little bit over now. But I appreciate y'all attending, and I'm curious to see what kind of questions you have.
Great, thanks Alex and David. And real quick before I get to the questions, for those of you who are wondering, to get your continuing ed, check your email, check a spam for your CE details. A survey will be there. Please take that. Once you close out of the session, a survey will pop up. GBCI number will be given to you, so you'll have to report that. For those of you listening on demand, so I'm not talking to any of you right now, complete the 10-question quiz with a 70% passing rate to pick up your CEUs. So, yeah, we got a lot of questions here coming in. I guess the first one, maybe just to kind of take a step back for people who might have caught a couple of these this acronym and are probably wondering what the heck it means. Can you just briefly describe what AMI means in this context?
Sure. So it's a HUD determined metric, area median income. So HUD determines what the local average is in terms of income and what people are bringing home in terms of their wages and salaries. So you set that average, and that's kind of your baseline or benchmark. Here in Atlanta, or the metro statistical area, it happens to be about 65,000. And from there, you do a percentage of the area median income to determine what is an affordable income, and then from that you determine what is a affordable rent. The geographic area. Oh, it's typically determined by metropolitan statistical area, or MSA, is how the AMI is determined. But that's how folks get to an average income and then make decisions about what level of affordability they're going to work to develop and support within that. And most of these fall into the 60 and 50% kind of category or below. You might hear the term workforce housing. That's typically 80 to 20% of AMI.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that detail. And I did send everybody a link there in the chat. You can check out AMI on Wikipedia on HUD. And then also for those of you asking for the report, a link to the report and executive summary was provided in the chat. So if you don't see it, let me know. It'll also be put up on our website as well. One of the questions I think that just came over too was how many respondents were in this survey on average?
So for the resident survey, I believe that we said the number over 600. Mm-hmm. And Alex, do you know about property managers?
We had about 20 property managers. So everyone completed a survey. And then we also let it open to some other people external to the study, just to increase the sample size.
You guys still with me? Hello? Hey, Alex, are you guys still with me? Well, I think we might have, can anyone else hear me? Is it just our presenters we've lost? Can someone just let me know if you can hear me? Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, it looks like we've temporarily lost our presenters. Hopefully they can get back in. A couple more questions that were coming in here, and I want to see if I can answer them real quick. Well, the other question that was coming up on some of the studies, and maybe I can kind of bundle these together, or well, I guess, did the soft costs include architect fees and the time in completing the paperwork for LEED, Earthcraft, Energy Star, and et cetera?
Yeah, so the architect fees and kind of the traditional fees and those kind of things and the soft costs would be in that division of work for sure. You'll see some of the green building certification costs come into that, and the administration come into an other section. But this is part of that issue where there's no real there's some standard, but some people have a slightly different substandard that they use for how they do their documentation and reporting, as we said about the site development costs, for example. So generally, those architectural fees would be in there, and that is in there. Some of the green building kind of administration stuff could fall into an other section.
Okay. And what was included in the maintenance costs?
Just general property upkeep. So it would be any kind of the kind of materials or the supplies that they would need to reinstall. So light bulbs would be mainly staff labor time for the maintenance staff to go out there and take care of it. And if they're not as well trained or don't have as much experience, it's likely it's going to take them longer, and they may have to go back later. So what we think we're seeing here on the O&M costs being higher is that is going back and having to do double work and maybe not getting good procurement deals and those kind of things, and just kind of the hurdles of working with a new program.
Okay, because I'd imagine things like LEDs are going to last longer. The proper landscaping, you're not going to have to cut it, mow it, trim it, or maybe you do, depending on what it is.
And these properties are not putting in LEDs.
Okay. Wow.
They're largely going to be doing the CFLs, right? And they're not doing incandescents anymore. But many of them are not necessarily doing the LEDs throughout the property. They may be putting them outside for the outdoor lighting or things like that. But the thing that we're noticing here and that we didn't mention is, while these properties are green certified, they're not certifying at levels of even a silver or a gold, and definitely not a platinum. So they're not going for those higher efficiency technologies and measures that might be greater than what we call energy code compliant construction. So that's another reason why these differences are relatively slight. The policies and incentives or requirements that are in these qualified allocation plans from the HFAs, they don't necessarily tell you you got to go for gold or you got to go for platinum, and then that would include things like LEDs or maybe solar photovoltaics and things of that nature that might be slightly higher technology or higher end. These are, these are just over the cusp of what might be energy code in a lot of cases, and that's why you're seeing such a slight difference. And we're working with these HFAs to continue to push the needle, because in Georgia we've been doing this for about 10 years, and people have gotten pretty good at it. And they know what level kind of works for them, but we think they can continue to do great work and achieve even greater levels of certification.
And so does the study actually break down what levels were being hit if you look into it, or does it not even look into that?
It got into that a little bit, but not super specifically. Most of these are certified at the bottom level.
Basically.
We had a couple LEED silver, maybe. I think 2 were LEED silver, but most of them are either at a LEED certified, they're meeting Energy Star, or they're at an Earthcraft certified.
Okay. Was there a difference between 3- to 5-year-old projects versus 1- to 1-year-old projects that still might have shakeout problems? Not really sure what that means.
I'm not really sure either. I mean, all of these are within a year or 2 of each other in terms of timeline of construction. So I guess they're saying, after year 1 for one of these slightly older properties, are they seeing improvements in O&M? And like we said, they're not even tracking a lot of this, so they really don't know. We didn't, we looked at a snap in time for a year's worth of data after occupancy. So we don't have that historical trend, and the property managers and owners themselves can't speak to those trends. So we don't accurately know a year-over-year kind of history of what that might look like, and if they are shaking out any of those issues that they might have had earlier on.
I had a question that I didn't see in the study, and maybe it was in there, but I imagine the question might come back, especially in affordable housing, that people might be concerned that they won't be comfortable if they're put into a sort of archaic green home where they imagine that you know, they have to keep the heat low just to save energy, which we all know isn't true here, but a lot of people have that belief, or even renters or tenants or even owners have that belief. So was there a study on comfort and comparing it to, are you more comfortable versus your last project, green versus non-green?
Yeah, we did. Overall, whether they were going into a green or a non-green development, their perception was that they were more comfortable and that they did feel safer. We did ask some kind of safety questions, and obviously asked the kind of affordability questions as well. But generally, whether or not it was in green or non-green, because of where they were coming from before, these were so much better, just being a newly constructed or recently rehabbed facility, that it was automatically going to be an improvement from what they were coming from. I mean, these are, you know, low-income seniors living in a very old home that they're coming out of, that they can no longer afford or take care of, or a very low-income family that was likely living in substandard quality housing that's thankfully being able to be put in and moved to a better quality, whether it's energy code or green or not. Either way, energy codes come up so much that you're still getting a good product. Green was a little bit better, though, on the comfort side in terms of their perception. But, you know, people are still doing the typical things, opening the windows, not setting the thermostat, setting them too high, too low, and, you know, adding additional appliances like, you know, space heaters or fans and things like that to really somewhat, you know, augment the benefits that might be accruing in terms of energy savings.
Yeah, that gets a lot of the education aspect of it, and from my experience going into these places, into these projects, is that the perception is cutting it off will save the most money and save on utility bills, where kind of the general line of thought now is that, no, just cut it back a little bit, not entirely off, so it doesn't have that really long, intense ramp-up period to come back to the desired temperature. So some of the actions that they may be doing to what they think get economic and support for reducing utility costs may not be getting them as much as they would if they use the system the way it was designed.
Mm-hmm. And I guess real quick too, just to describe a little bit more about Southface and Earthcraft. I mean, what, given that, especially LEED, given its international recognition and everybody knowing about it, I was very surprised to see a substantial uptake in Earthcraft percentage-wise versus LEED. What, you know, what, was there any specific reason for that, or is it just because people were looking at more local programs or costs?
So this is a Southeast-specific study, and Earthcraft is a Southeast regional green building program. Mm-hmm. So they just kind of go hand in hand, right? Okay. And it tends to be it's less costly in terms of the fees that are paid for LEED when talking about Earthcraft. Mm-hmm. And so it's just local market conditions, as well as, I mean, in our state, in the local Georgia qualified allocation plan, you know, you can do LEED or you can do Earthcraft or NGBS or what have you, or Enterprise Green Communities, but more often than not, they elect to choose Earthcraft for a variety of benefits. I think one is they get to work with a whole host of local, well-trained technical advisors that do the third-party verification. They get to work with great people on our staff like David here, who come out and do the QA and QC. And it's just kind of that local knowledge, that regional specificity that I think is why Earthcraft is so much more prevalent. And I think there are some cost savings on the fee side. And I'll let David add anything to that.
No, that's you got it covered.
Okay. Good.
Well, great. That's all the time we have for today, so we're going to go and wrap up. But Alex, David, I really appreciate your time, and thanks to Southface Institute for putting this study together. I think it's going to be very helpful. We're very excited to help get the word out about it, and thanks for your time for promoting it. Just real quick, where can people go to find out more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're able to, you can copy down the links here for the report. I know you posted them to the Q&A as well. Both of our contact information are here as well. Please feel free to shoot us an email or give us a call with any kind of questions you may have related to what we talked about today. And then other than that, please visit our website, www.southface.org. And you can find out about all the many great programs and projects and advocacy initiatives that we have here at Southface.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks, everybody. Again, this has been a Green Home Institute webinar series. I hope you'll join us for our next week's sessions and check us out on our YouTube channel and online to learn more. So, thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks very much.